The fake news debate that's raging in the United States has now landed in Canada, but with a twist. All week long, Justin Trudeau and his heritage minister have faced a hailstorm of questions from the opposition benches about the decision to appoint an anti-conservative union to the panel laying out the criteria for struggling news outlets to get a share of the government's $600 million media bailout fund. It applies to newspapers, by the way, not to broadcasters like us. Unifor, which represents the lion's share of Canadian journalists, has run ads calling itself Andrew Scheer's worst nightmare. And the union's boss, Jerry Dias, has said Scheer is unfit to lead. The Conservatives, meanwhile, accuse the Liberals of stacking the deck to try to get more positive news coverage ahead of the campaign. Is the fund that's meant to help journalists actually undermining trust in Canadian media? For more on that and what to watch for as the government pushes to ratify the new NAFTA before the election, let's bring in the scrum. Michelle Zilio is a reporter for the Globe and Mail. Joyce Napier is CTV's Ottawa bureau chief. Craig Oliver is CTV's chief political commentator. And our special guest today is the man on the hot seat himself, Unifor's national president, Jerry Dias. He is in Toronto. And at the center of this whole thing, Jerry, welcome to everyone. I got to start with you. How can your union be on an advisory panel that purports to support independent journalism when you are openly partisan against Andrew Scheer? Can't you not see how the optics of this are frankly undermining the very people you represent?
Absolutely not. First of all, I'm not on the panel. We've recommended an incredible journalist, 25-year history, worked for Torstar, worked for Post Media. But if you look at the makeup of the panel, there's 8 people, and they all have to come to a consensus before the recommendations go forward. So nobody's leading the argument. The other side of it is 4 of the 8 panelists are representing the industry. And we already know that when you look at the print media, 77% of the editors, the newspapers themselves, are openly conservative supporters. They do that in every provincial and federal election. So if you have the representation of representatives of the newspapers that are openly supporting conservatives, and we have a Unifor nominee who is a journalist who has incredible integrity,
Jerry,
we can argue it both ways.
Okay, but look, you've politicized this protest with your high-profile campaign. Are you now going to either recuse your organization from the panel or back off from your campaign against Andrew Scheer?
I am not backing off at all. I think the Conservatives aren't fit to govern. Look what's happening here in Ontario. Ford cuts $17 million for women's programs that are dealing with violence. Cuts funding for kids with autism. Is getting rid of 3,000 teachers and says it'll help kids become more resilient. So look, this is very political. It doesn't matter what happens. I am not supporting the Conservatives.
You know what? I think that there is, on the side of Conservatives, a mistrust of the media, because the perception is this is small L liberal media. There's, an inherent progressive sort of atmosphere in newsrooms. And so therefore, we're all pro-liberal. Like, let's face it, we get a lot of that from the Conservatives, especially us who cover political issues. So there's, to begin with, the bailout to the Conservatives is red flags because, oh my God, they're going to give more money to the liberal media, and that means we will get negative coverage. So just at the beginning of this debate, the Conservatives are just uncomfortable with the bailout itself, never mind with Jerry Dias and Unifor.
I got to tell you, I had trouble being outraged by all this.
Yeah, me too.
I did my best to try. I mean, was Jerry going to be sending out secret emails to thousands of his union members, giving them their instructions about what to say about Mr. Scheer and the Conservative Party? Furthermore, as I understand it, this group won't actually decide who gets exactly how much money. They're kind of bigger picture than that.
I don't know, Michelle. Justice doesn't have to be done. It also the perception of justice has to be done. Is the perception of this bailout now that the Trudeau's putting his thumb on the scale with guys like Jerry Dias to try to influence this election?
Well, the first thing I need to say is
Look,
I have a
I
kind
don't
of
buy the argument.
Hold on, let Michelle Zilio. Hang
Hold on. Here, I am a member of Mr. Dias's union. I am a member of the union at the Globe and Mail. So I need to first of all put that out there and make it clear. But that does not mean that the union represents my views. What I would say is, from a journalistic perspective, we remain as nonpartisan as we possibly can. But it is hard to not argue that this is going to be an election issue. Now that Unifor is on the panel and also targeting Mr. Scheer, this is going to be an election campaign issue, and I think it's going to put the media in a very difficult position of trying to cover this issue.
I've got a lot more respect for journalism in this country than
Me
the
too.
people who are complaining about this. I don't buy for an argument that somehow journalists, their integrity is somehow going to be impacted. People have their own beliefs. This whole argument is about free speech. It's all about journalistic integrity. So journalists have integrity, they have their own mind. Jerry Dias isn't going to tell my members that work in the media how to vote.
Jerry, the people that are it is fair to say that people are going to be suspicious if a union's running campaigns against Andrew Scheer and is on an advisory committee that's allocating money to a struggling series of media outlets. Come on, to me, it's hard not to pretend there's not a politicization here.
Look, what will those people
I'm
say when
on
Post
this.
Media and others come out saying they're supporting the Conservative Party in the next election? Let's face facts. Papers have their own political beliefs.
Right.
They have their own political leanings. So what, is Andrew Scheer, when Post Media comes out to say we're supporting the Conservatives, is he going to say, no, don't do that? I think it's wrong that the media has taken a position. Of course he's not going to say that.
Well,
but listen, I respect their right to have their own opinion. I respect the rights of journalists to question my decisions. That's what free speech is all about.
Let me move to NAFTA quickly, and maybe there's a different advisory committee structure that changes all this. I don't know, but let me move to NAFTA. Vice President Mike Pence, Craig, was in Ottawa, and he made a big fuzzy warmth. We're going to ratify the new NAFTA by this summer. It's all going to be great. Hours later, Donald Trump threatened to slap new nasty tariffs on Mexico. Could blow the entire thing up. Is this deal a done deal, or are we headed for, I don't know, is this thing in peril?
I think that this is very, very threatened. Why would the Mexicans go along with this? Who knows when we can get back to this again? It may be off the rails permanently.
This makes even less sense than the other tariffs this president has imposed. As he is looking for allies for this deal, he sent his vice president to Canada to show the Democrats, look, we have the backing of our allies here. Just to get, he had to go out of his country to get allies. Right. And what does he do the next day? He slaps tariffs on the Mexicans who are prepared to adopt this NAFTA bill. So why he's doing this right now is totally incomprehensible. He has been incoherent before, but I think this time it's like fantastically incoherent.
It was complete hypocrisy for him to come here, since apparently he knew this was coming, and try to sell us on this deal and all the reasons why it looked like it was on its way.
But it gives the Canada every...
Look, this deal is dead.
No.
I don't see this thing getting ratified at all, and here's why. Number one, the only way it gets ratified is if the Democrats allow that to happen. And the only way that happens is if the Mexican government completely folds. They move on all the issues as it relates to labor standards, enforceability. If they move on the whole issue with drug patents from 10 years back to 8 years, unless Mexico completely folds, then the Democrats will never support it. And if Democrats don't support it, it's going nowhere. Wow. And Donald Trump's latest move with the 5%, 10%, 15, up to 25% tariffs, if I'm Mexico, I would tell him to shove it and I would just walk away from it.
This speaks to the total unpredictability of President Trump. His second-hand man comes to Ottawa, makes a big show out of how secure this deal is. Canada, 2 days before, had put forward its legislation to ratify NAFTA. The U.S. is trying to do the same thing. But meanwhile, his boss back in Washington is basically upending the entire thing. So I think this thing is in real dangerous territory at this point.
Or it's a bluff. Or it's another Donald Trump bluff.
All I know is if you're watching the Raptors take on the Warriors, guacamole is going to be expensive in the U.S. right now. All right, Jerry Dias, got to leave it there. Thank you, sir, for joining us very much. The rest of the scrum's going to stick with us.
Always my pleasure.